You've purchased or are about to purchase your first chickens and are getting ready to get them in the mail, pick them up from a breeder, or you're hatching your own eggs. But you still have so many unanswered questions. Stay tuned, and I'll help you with that. Hey y'all, I'm Renee, and welcome to Tater Town. Getting your first flock of chickens is so exciting. I still get excited when I'm getting new chicks, whether from a hatchery or hatching them myself. And even when you think you've done all the research and know all you can, I can tell you from experience that sometimes new and unexpected events pop up. Many people think raising backyard chickens is all fun and games, but the reality is that it can be a bit of a challenge, especially for beginners. Choosing the right breed and setting up a safe and healthy coop can feel overwhelming, and I've spoken to many new chicken owners who struggled with these very issues. I'm sure you've got questions like what breed is best for me or how big does my coop need to be? But for me, I always wanted to know more of the nitty-gritty details, and sometimes I had trouble finding that information. So that's what I'd like to go over with you today. If you appreciate and like the content of the videos that I've been making, please be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. It really does help me to keep making content that will help you do those things you never thought you could. You'll want to have everything you need for your new arrivals ready to go at least 1 to 2 weeks in advance. This will give you enough time to decide if everything you have in your setup is going to work without having to rush around once you have your babies in hand. Here are my top 7 things you'll want to know to get yourself ready, and I'll go over each one in depth. Location, brooder, you're going to want a heat source, you need bedding, food and water, medical supplies, and then you're going to want to know how to prepare them to leave the brooder once they're old enough. The first thing you need to decide is, where do you plan on keeping your baby chicks? Obviously, this will depend on how many chicks you get. A lot of people choose to use a spare bathroom and use the bathtub as a brooder box. Some people choose to keep them in the living room, basement, or a shed. All of these are great options, but keep these things in mind. What is the temperature in the area you choose? Obviously, you're going to need a heat source for the chicks, but it's important to house them in an area that is well ventilated and not drafty. You also want to make sure the ambient temperature isn't too cold. Baby chicks need a lot of heat in the first few weeks of their life, so keeping them warm and dry is very important. Next, wherever you set up your brooder, expect there to be a ridiculous amount of dust to accumulate. It doesn't matter how often you clean, there's going to be dust everywhere, and that dust is a mixture of feathers, dander, feed, and dried chicken poop. So if you don't want your bathroom or living room to be a mess every day for 2 to 3 months, I would highly suggest you find a different location for your chicks. But I discovered last year that letting one of my broody hens raise baby chicks is the best solution. So from now on, unless there's an emergency, I'll be letting the baby chicks raised outside with a mama hen. I'll be doing a video on that soon, so stay tuned, because you can't just put baby chicks in with the big chicks. It takes a little finesse, or else the big chickens could possibly kill the little chicks. So if you decide to hatch your own chicks at home, a broody hen is definitely the way to go, in my opinion. Okay, now you're probably wondering, what am I gonna use as a brooder? For those of you unfamiliar with this term, it's just a fancy word for a heated place where you put your chicks until they're feathered enough to live outside. You can use anything. And I do mean anything, from a cardboard box to a bathtub to a large aquarium to fancy expensive brooder boxes you can buy online. Just remember, again, there will be lots of dust and you will have to clean it regularly, especially as the chicks get bigger. And they get big pretty quickly. So they may outgrow that cardboard box or bathtub, and you may also want to have a screen or something that you can put over the top that keeps them from jumping or flying out once they get big enough. You certainly don't want a jailbreak. And materials like a cardboard box will have to be completely replaced at some point, since the water and poop will make it break down. You also don't want your chicks to be living on wet or soiled bedding. Now, I've used a bunch of different things as a brooder box, but the best I found is a small pet playpen. Some are made with water-resistant or waterproof material. You can move them around easily, and when you're done with it, it's easy to fold it back up and store it for future use. So I'm gonna take this out. The nice thing about these is it's super easy to clean, and you can move them around easily. Do this over here. Also, most have a zippered top, so all you have to do is zip them in and they won't be able to fly out. But if you go this route, please keep in mind that they are drafty, so you may want to keep them in a warm area versus a cold basement or shed. No matter what you use, make sure to remove any stickers, and that includes used cardboard boxes. Chicks will peck and try to eat anything and everything, so you don't want them to eat anything that's going to clog up their crop. Next, you're going to need a good heat source. This is necessary. Baby chicks need to be kept at 95 degrees Fahrenheit for the first week of their life. Then you slowly decrease the temperature by 5 degrees each week thereafter. When you go into a farm store or wherever that sells baby chicks, you almost always see a heat lamp. They are cheap and effective, but they can be very dangerous. Remember earlier I said that where you house your chicks, expect dust everywhere? Well, that dust, as well as the bedding, can create a fire hazard with a heat lamp. Also, if the lamp isn't secured very well, or if a chick or someone knocks it down, you could have smashed glass in the brooder, which, believe me, chicks will try to eat. Or it can catch their bedding on fire. So if you have to use a heat lamp, be very, very careful with it. And make sure you have a thermometer to check how hot it is. I typically rely on an infrared thermometer to check the surface temperature below the heat source to make sure it's hot enough, but not too hot. Believe me, chicks will let you know if it's too hot or too cold by either huddling together and chirping underneath the light or moving away from it. A better choice would be a ceramic heat emitter bulb. They're safer, but can still present a problem if it falls into the brooder box. If you go with the heat bulb or the emitter, I highly recommend getting a reflector with a bulb guard for added protection. In my opinion, the best solution is a brooder heat plate. It actually looks like this. This is just a top that goes on it to keep chicks from wanting to beat on top of it. They're easy to adjust with the legs up and down, and they don't get near as hot as a heat lamp, but they can still get pretty hot. So you need to be careful and make sure you get the correct size for the number of chicks you plan to have. This one here is a 12 by 12, and you can do, I think, up to 20 chicks with that. But the thing about this is there's no glass to break, and you can even get a little feather skirt to put around it so your chicks can feel like they're under a hen. Oh, that's supposed to go down. You totally don't need it, but I dig using it. Just make sure, if you're gonna use a heat plate, that you let it warm up for at least 24 hours before your chicks arrive. And make sure you're using a brooder plate in a room that has an ambient temperature that's at least 60 degrees Fahrenheit. But anything you use will be great. You don't have to spend a lot of money, just make sure whatever you choose, keep it safe. Remember the size of your brooder. If it's smaller, it will keep the heat in better. If it's larger, you'll need more heat. And I'd make sure you test whatever you use way before your chicks arrive. It is extremely important that they have a warm place to go as soon as you get them. If it doesn't work, you're gonna have a problem. The next thing you need is bedding. Now, the first 2 or 3 days, I use paper towels. I just throw down some paper towel sheets. It makes it super easy to clean, and you won't have to worry if your chicks are eating their food or the traditional bedding you'll use after this. Truthfully, I think the use of paper towels is only used in this setting because there's no hen to guide them as to what to eat and what not to eat. When I let my broody hen raise the chicks, I realized I had nothing to worry about with their standard bedding because mom would show them what to eat and would peck them on the head if they were eating something they shouldn't. So yeah, broody hen raising is so much easier. After the first few days, I switched from the paper towels to either pine shavings or hemp bedding. Now you'll read and see a ton of different reasons why you should or shouldn't use one product over another. And honestly, don't get into the weeds over it. The only wood material I would avoid is cedar shavings. Chickens have very sensitive respiratory tracts, and there's some debate over whether or not the cedar oil is bad for them. Some people use it, others are very much against it. So I just don't use it, mostly because I find the hemp to be a better product overall. It helps reduce odor and can absorb a lot more moisture than other products. It's a little more expensive, so if it's too cost prohibitive, go with what you can afford. Next up is food and water. Okay, these two things are gonna drive you crazy depending on what you use to feed and water them, because chicks and adult chickens can make a mess. So let's go over the water part first. You may already know that you will probably have to show your chicks where and how to get water. If you're using a regular trough style water like this, waterer, it's recommended you dunk their beaks into it so they know that's where to drink. And it's true that once one figures it out, the rest will follow. But the standard chick drinking troughs are a pain in the butt. You will constantly have to wash them out because your chicks will poop in it, they'll step in it, and they're gonna scratch their bedding into it. You may also need to add some rocks into it, depending on the size of the bowl, in order to keep your chicks from drowning. So if you haven't bought your waterers yet, I highly recommend getting a waterer with a vertical nipple on it. I'm gonna grab this over here. This comes with both a horizontal and a vertical nipple. As they get older, they can use the horizontal ones, but initially you want to put the vertical one on, and the nice thing is this just screws in. I tried it with my last set of chicks I got from a hatchery, and they figured that out almost immediately. They just peck this little metal thing and the water comes out and they drink from it. These things totally eliminate the need to keep the water clean. There will be more water dripping underneath the spout, but you will not have to worry about dirty water. Again, there's nothing wrong with using whatever you want, but some things will make your life easier than others. And you want to be sure to have some electrolytes on hand, especially for the first day or two. Being born is hard enough, and it's even harder if you've spent a few days traveling in the mail. Electrolytes will help give them a boost of nutrients and fluids. Just make sure to provide plain water as well. There's a bunch of great ones out there, and you can even make your own. But I've used all of these: Save a Chick electrolytes, Hydro Hen, and I'm currently, for my adult birds, I'm using Flock Leader Recovery 911. And I'll put links to those in the comments, and that will at least give you some options. As for feeders, use whatever you've got. I don't really think there's anything that's better than anything else for baby chicks. You can use traditional feeders or paper egg cartons. And this, I actually like this one because it's dual purpose. The one side is a waterer, or you can flip it over and the other side is used as a feeder, so at least it does give you options. Regardless, it's gonna be a mess no matter what you use. But once they're old enough, check out my video on the rodent-proof, weather-proof, less mess automatic feeder that you can build yourself. And I'll put that video up in the in-video links at the end. As for the type of food, that again will be a matter of preference. The easiest is gonna be a starter crumble, either medicated or not. If your chicks were vaccinated for coccidiosis, not Merrick's, but coccidiosis, you should not give them medicated feed. It is counterproductive. But if they haven't been vaccinated for coccidiosis, you can give them medicated feed. But is it necessary? I used medicated crumbles with my first chicks, but haven't used it since. This parasite is pretty much everywhere, and it can quickly overwhelm a baby chick, resulting in death. The thing about medicated feed is it's meant to protect the chicks when they're the most vulnerable. But oppositely, the more they're exposed to it, they can build up a resistance. So more and more, I'm okay with not giving them medicated feed and only treating them if they get it, as opposed to giving them a preventative. Also, since I started raising the chicks with the broody hen, I won't use it since the adults should not get medicated feed. It's really up to you, and there's no right or wrong, only a preference. But after my first round of chicks, I started using Scratch and Peck starter mash because I could ferment it. And since I ferment my adult chickens' feed, I wanted the chicks to get used to it sooner than later. The only downside to starting chicks on feed that isn't a traditional crumble is you will need to give them access to chick grit to help them digest larger particles of food. And I mean baby chick grit, not grit meant for adult chickens. It's a little more work, but for me it's worth it. I would also make sure that you have some medical supplies on hand in case of an emergency. Most things you'll come across with baby chicks will be coccidiosis, like I mentioned before. You're gonna get pasty butt or poopy butt, crossbeak, or leg and feet issues. I'm not gonna go into those individual issues in this video, but I do think you should be aware of them because you'll need to treat them right away if you see any signs. I'd recommend having some non-sterile surgical gloves, some small washcloths, and a bucket of some sort that you can fill with water in the case of pasty butt. I like this one because it has a drain in the bottom. The nice thing about this is it's completely collapsible, and then I can store it easily for future use. I also recommend having some Vet RX, which is essential oils and a carrier oil that helps promote respiratory function. You can sprinkle it on their bedding, or you can put a light amount on your hands when you're petting them, on their wings, and a little bit around their head. You can even put it in their feed and water. Just make sure you follow the instructions. I'd also recommend having Vetericin for poultry, which is a spray, a poultry eye wash and eye gel, because honestly, most of the stuff you're gonna deal with are pecks to the eye, or if they get some of the bedding in their eye. And it's nice to have something to clean it out with the eye wash and then put a little gel in there to keep it soothed if their eye is irritated. I'm gonna make a video shortly on what I keep in my medical kit, since sometimes issues arise that you need to treat right away, and you can't rely on getting it at the store or online in a timely manner. And finally, on this subject, check to make sure your nearby vet treats chickens. Most vets don't see birds, so you may need to look for an aviary vet or one that specializes in exotics. I know, it's a chicken and you have to go to an exotic vet. I, myself, am usually really good at this, but was actually surprised when I called my farm vet to find out they don't treat chickens. I couldn't even get them to run a fecal sample. Thankfully, there's another vet nearby that does. And there are a lot of great resources online you can reach out to if you need help. The last thing you need to prepare for is taking your babies outside. Now, the goal is to wait until they are fully feathered. Depending on the breed, this will be sometime around 6 to 8 weeks. Until then, they are not able to regulate their body temperature effectively. So if it's still cold outside, they won't be able to stay warm. And if it's too hot, well, they're gonna have trouble staying cool. You can certainly start taking them out on field trips on 70-degree days for short periods of time, and that's gonna give them a chance to acclimate and have some fun. But I'd wait to leave them outside in their new coop permanently until the lows are above 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And of course, while you're raising them inside, you'll have plenty of time to get your outside coop ready for them. If you have the ability, or a friend that can help, build a coop instead of buying one. This is because coops are very expensive. So you'll be able to build a much bigger coop than what you could buy for a similar price. And I highly recommend that you get something bigger than what you think you're gonna need, because once you start with a few chicks, it's really hard to stop getting more. And be sure to check out my video on the coop that I have for some ideas and why I decided to go with certain designs over others. And I'll be back with another video soon that will give you some things to think about before buying or building your new coop. Let me know if you have any questions or comments, and thank you again for hanging out with me on Tater Town. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so you can see more videos that will help you do those things you never thought you could.